Friends and colleagues, welcome this rainy morning at Oxford. It's really fantastic to see you all here today. Want to guarantee an amazing time. We promise not to disappoint. You will not need a fourth cup of coffee, nor will you need the toothpicks to prop your eyes open. But if you pub crawled last night, we can't guarantee anything. So that was your choice. So here we are, the power of proximity. Look around this room. We have powerful impact investors and foundations. We have scrappy social entrepreneurs. We have global influencers, an array of amazing human beings from around the globe. You have come here together. We have convened this event in order for you to be able to be more proximate to one another. The power of proximity. Recently, I was working on a university campus and I met a Somali Bantu student who wants to become a technologist. Her name is Yasmina, and she's a fantastic, energetic young girl. I said, Yasmina, what is your backstory and what drives you to get out of bed in the morning? She said, as a child, I was in war-torn Mogadishu. I was then displaced and spent most of my childhood in a refugee camp on the border of Kenya, to be resettled in the US of A. My father was killed in the war, and my mother, pre-literate herself, brought 7 children to the US. She's now working 3 jobs. She doesn't have time for education or technology, but what she does say to us is that she wants us to become educated so that we can give back to our own people in East Africa. Her mother wants her to be proximate. I think each of us brings with us a very visceral identification with the people who we work with, the most disenfranchised around the world. And many of us have had that inflection point, that opportunity to sort of reevaluate our priorities and focus on the things that matter most. And we're all in this room because we see exponential technologies as a way to accelerate what we're already doing, to really move the needle for these people. Today's going to be really incredible. We have Peter Tufano, the Dean of the Said Business School. He will be followed by Ani Patton-Power, my amazing colleague. I've told my girls, forget becoming Wonder Woman as a superhero. If you want to be anyone, just be Ani Patton-Power. And then Ani will provide some definitions, and she'll set the stage for our incredible speakers today. Really powerful, jaw-dropping presentations in a TED-style format that you'll have the opportunity to hear. Now, Peter Tufano is an incredible individual. On a personal level, I had the opportunity to study under him in the MBA program. And he brought his powerful leadership. He has his bachelor's degree, his MBA, and his PhD in business economics from Harvard University. He taught there for 22 years until he took this place at the Said Business School. But as students, in the context of all the madness that's going on around the world, he, through his leadership, showed us the power of proximity and what that means for us to be in the business world and to be proximate to the most disenfranchised. So without further ado, Peter.
I just want to welcome you here to Oxford. I know you've been here for a few days, but I haven't had an opportunity to welcome you all. You may wonder what happens in this place in the other 51 weeks a year when the orange signs come down. Are we just a venue for events? And the answer is absolutely not. And the topics that you're dealing with over this week, questions around social progress, are ones that are near and dear to our heart year long. Part of that is manifested in the Skoll Center for Social Enterprise, and I hope that among the other shoulder events that you get a chance to do, ecosystem events, you come to the most Oxford of events on Thursday, the Oxford Union debate on universities and social impact. So please join us for that. So the rest of the year, what do we do? For example, if you were to come here, you would find next week a course on social on impact investing and social finance, and then soon impact measurement. Peterson over here from our school is leading on those courses. Or you might go online and you'd find some courses that we're doing on fintech or distributed ledger technology, blockchain, or soon to come algorithmic trading. Let's put these two ideas together. On the one hand, we care deeply about social progress, and that may come through social enterprises, but it may come through large firms, or it may come through mega projects, all of which we study. On the other hand, we're looking at technologies, how technologies change society for good and for ill. So put those two together, and how is it that we can actually harness some of these technologies in order to achieve the goals that we like to achieve? And you may hear more about these kind of applications, but tracking to make sure that diamonds are kind of the kinds of diamonds we would like to deal with as opposed to not, or tracking the provenance of products so that we know that they've gone through ethical supply chains. Distributed ledger technology and AI have lots and lots of promise. They also have lots of potential problems. So exploring those ideas over the course of a year is what we do the other 51 weeks. So this morning, enjoy a remarkable morning. And I'm proud to say that our two conveners here, Superwoman, Anna, and the other Superwoman, Nikki, are both our alums. So if you want to know what does it look like to be a student at Saïd Business School, you're going to see two of our best. Thank you very much.
Sure. Goodness. So no expectations. So we're probably going to have a few people trickling in. As you probably know by now, my name is Ani Patton-Power, and I am an entrepreneur in residence at the Skoll Center for Social Entrepreneurship and an associate fellow here at Oxford. I have also founded my own advisory firm that seeks to help founders and funders use exponential technology to allocate capital for impact. And in my spare time, I'm also an advisor to the Bertha Center for Social Innovation in Cape Town, where I live. So I have the world's longest commute up here to Cape Town to do most of my job. So I'm really excited to convene this event. We have a whole set of speakers that have different ideas around exponential technology. I wanted to start with a couple of definitions. I don't know how comfortable everyone is with some of the language we're going to be using. I've asked our presenters to, be as introductory as possible, but also still getting to the meat of what they do. So I'm going to attempt to define some relatively complex terms. Come on. So exponential technologies are technologies that have an exponential growth curve. And generally we use the term to describe things like artificial intelligence and blockchain. It means that they're eminently scalable with an exponential growth curve, and this is one of the reasons that they are very interesting. So artificial intelligence is essentially the creation of computer systems that are able to perform tasks that usually require human intelligence. And artificial intelligence with the capability of the processing means that we are able to, with these systems, calculate and compound millions and millions of data points simultaneously, which gives us potential processing capability beyond what our human brains have. The blockchain, or distributed ledger technology, is essentially a decentralization of transactions of any nature. And it's a good way to think about it is actually an economic layer to the internet. So what it does is it provides us a protocol, which is a system of rules. So you might hear the word protocol said today, for tokens or entities of value to be transferred on a P2P basis, on a peer-to-peer basis. And the interesting thing about it is that you don't need a central actor to be able to, or that is required to facilitate this transaction. Now, the transaction doesn't have to be monetary. We're probably most of us more familiar with cryptocurrencies that do use distributed ledger technology to do monetary transactions. So cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ether and Ripple, I think there's a couple people from Ripple here, RippleWorks, are built on blockchain. And one of the advantages of the distributed ledger is that there is no centralized clearinghouse for these transactions. and the transactions are completely transparent to the entire community. Come on in. So this transparency and the irrefutability of the transactions make it really interesting for some of the applications we're going to talk about today, including land tenure and supply chains, which Peter mentioned. Financial inclusion is another one. So in addition to the cryptocurrencies and the transactions, another element you're going to hear talked about today are smart contracts. Smart contracts essentially allow you to execute a contract without the sign-off of a single centralized unit. Instead, you can have often multiple third-party verifications that trigger the utilization of the contract, the execution of the contract. A lot of terms. I was trying to be very concise. There's like whole papers that are written on that, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Okay, why is this interesting to how we structure impact funding? So I think, as Peter said, there are huge pitfalls, but the opportunities are also really interesting. So I've spent the past 8 years of my career building innovative financial instruments that have social and environmental impact embedded into those instruments, and teaching others how to do that. And it's not been clear sailing, let me tell you. And a lot of the issues that we've come across in the work, I think, can be partially addressed by some of this advanced technology. So over the past 8 years, I have experienced huge issues building things like impact bonds, green outcomes funds, algorithmic social lending platforms, social milestone-based contracts. And the more and more that I learn from the people in the room and many of those that aren't in the room, the more I see the possibility to build a layer of impact measurement and potentially smart contracts that help to overcome some of these relatively insurmountable issues. So I'm going to be done speaking now and turn it over to our amazing speakers. So we've got Scott and Tom up first. They're going to talk about the future of impact intelligence, gathering impact intelligence in urban communities. Julie is then going to talk about making property rights and claims of individuals publicly recorded and globally verified. Raf is going to then talk about bringing transparency to social funding through blockchain. Chi is going to tell us about leveraging biotechnology, the blockchain, and virtual reality to clean the Niger Delta. Sean is then going to tell us how he is building a decentralized impact-validated marketplace. Ben is going to give us the future of aid finance. And Todd is going to wrap it all up with closing reflections on a decentralized impact finance revolution. So we have a very long list of speakers. And you can't see it, guys, but over there I have one of those long hooks. And I'm going to pull you off. So I have told you all, and those that you know me know I will. So you have 8 minutes each, and we're going to start.
Thank you. Good morning. Morning, everyone. That's great. The next slide. We need a clicker. We need a clicker, Annie. Thank you so much.
We just need to switch over to the...
Great. Hi everyone. This is Scott. He is the CEO of Scout Impact.
This is Tom. He is the Chief Impact Officer for Acumen.
Great. Thanks, Scott. We're actually going to talk about the future of impact measurement more generally, so not the cities. So you'll see us skip over a slide in a second, which had something to do with cities, but we've got 8 minutes, so we're going really, really fast. So last year, Scott came to talk to me about blockchain and impact measurement, some of the strengths that might be applied and some of the challenges. This was really exciting to me. We've thought at Lean Data a little bit more about that, our approach to impact measurement at Acumen. The blockchain could be part of our future, but we didn't really know how. I was a complete newbie to this area and asked Scott a whole load of really, really stupid questions. But one of the exciting things that we've been trying to do is take impact measurement, make it faster, more effective, and critically cheaper. And so could blockchain be part of the solution to doing that?
No. Let me try and explain. On the surface, perhaps not, but it gets better. Blockchain gives you a really neat claim and verify model. Before I go any further, let me talk about the very small section of blockchain that we're actually talking about. We're not talking about cryptocurrencies. We're not going to talk about Bitcoin or anything like that. We're not talking about crypto economics. Some of the guys on the panel may well do. We're talking about using blockchain basically as a glorified database. It's something that you can write data to, and once you've written data to that database, you can be sure that it won't be tampered with, it can't be retracted, and it can't be lost down the back of the sofa when it's audit time. That's what blockchain gives you, and that's really how we're using it in this context. So claim and verify, this is a really neat model, and it kind of underpins everything that everybody's doing on blockchain with impact measurement. Claim means you gather some evidence from the real world that something actually happened, and you put that on blockchain. Or somebody makes an assertion that something happened in the real world, and that gets recorded on blockchain. Then the verify part, a third party comes along, an independent third party, and confirms that that thing in the real world actually did happen. And their verification goes on blockchain as well. Claim and verify. That's the basic principle behind everything. The problem is, gathering all of that data and cleaning that data can be expensive. Paying somebody to show up and verify that data can also be very costly. So blockchain by itself maybe doesn't solve the whole problem, doesn't make things that much cheaper. But there is hope. We see three different kinds of data converging. I'm going to talk very quickly about transactional data. This is literally payments, and watching payments as they hop from organization to organization. They get tokenized, and you can see that happen in real time. This is exactly what Ben from Disperse is going to talk about. That's their technology. You'll hear more about that in a second. There's going to be lots more of that in the future to track. That's data we can use. Also in this category, supply chains have been mentioned quite a lot. We would put handshakes in supply chains in this same transactional category. It's where one supplier, maybe a ginner, says, here's 20 bales of BCI cotton, and another supplier, maybe a mill, says, thank you very much, I confirm I'm receiving 20 bales of BCI cotton. That's a handshake. That's transactional data. There's going to be a lot more of that, and we can use that. I'll explain how in just a second. Engagement. This is basically where Acumen eats. This is what Tom does.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm the person who does the least sexy thing in this room, which is surveys. A big part of impact measurement in the future is we're not going to get away from surveys. It's the thing that frustrates me more than perhaps anything in this space, is that everyone talks about impact measurement and it's all big numbers, and we forget to actually listen to people's lived experience. So surveys, ones that are cheap to deploy, benchmarkable, standardized, and digital, are going to be a really, really big part of the three of these data points. We have also been trying to do some work with ambient data, mainly sensors, trying to build some, trying to use some. We've had some success and plenty of failures, but we know we need to continue to try harder, and it's going to be a big part of our future.
Thank you. So what we both agree on is that ambient is the real growth area here. Let me sort of elaborate on what that might mean. Hedge funds have been using satellite imagery for years. That is finally affordable to the masses. Also, off-the-shelf algorithms that can look at that satellite imagery for you and tell you what's in it are now available off the shelf. Check out things like Planet Labs and what Lucas Joppa is doing with GeoAI at Microsoft. IoT brings us a whole array of very, very cheap sensors and beacons, things that you can embed in the environment, in buildings, in equipment, that can give you a constant data feed. This is new ambient intelligence that we can gather. This becomes interesting when these three things start to converge, which is why we've done it as this Venn diagram. Because the more independent data points that you can get to corroborate the same event, the more sure you are that it happened, and the less need there is to send a human verifier to that location. Let me give you a quick example. You're fitting a solar array for a microgrid on the rooftop of a community building in an urban slum, say. Thank you. We get a whole bunch of data from that event. So the engineer that's finished the installation takes out his smartphone, IDs himself with a fingerprint, takes several photographs of the successful installation. They get time-stamped, they get GPS stamped. Those photographs get uploaded and hashed to a blockchain straight away. The customer that's there does exactly the same thing, but they also add a 5-star rating to that engineer for the work that they've done. Other things that happen as well, immediately that solar panel starts sending data about its performance back to the cloud as well. So we can see what wattage it's producing at what time of day. Other things that start to happen, we see some payments flying around with tokenized tracking via blockchain. So we might see a micro lender pay the solar provider. We might see some local households start to make first repayments to that micro lender. All of those transactions would be visible. And finally, if you really, really want to be sure that that solar panel has been fitted, within a couple of days, an algorithm can confirm from the satellite imagery that those things reflecting in the sun from space are actually solar panels. That's complete overkill. You don't need all 6 of those data points to verify that that thing happened. But that's the picture. Normally, 2 or 3 are quite enough. So this is the trick. You can verify things without sending a person there if enough of the data points corroborate the same thing. Essentially, good, clean, actionable data verifies itself. Here's where we see it going.
Great. So a few last thoughts on some big parts of the equation that we need to fill in. It is, as I said earlier, it is an exciting time, I think, for impact measurement. The future is not going to be, the good news is the future is not going to be RCT by RCT by RCT. It's going to be, we think, these sorts of data all coming together. And one part of it will be platforms where you can find digital surveys that you can deploy really, really easily and cost effectively. And we at Acumen are just building our first SaaS platform for this. Think of it kind of as the iTunes for social surveys or the Etsy for social surveys.
And our tools to help with this triangulation idea fit into that same category. What's really interesting here is validation 2.0, which is just a made-up term for how the validation market is being disrupted. With what we're doing with triangulation, with what platforms like IXO and Alice are doing, you'll hear about those in a second, opening up a marketplace for third-party verification, the way validation is procured, is provided, and is paid for will be completely disrupted over the coming years. That's the space to watch out for.
Great. So putting my impact investor hat back on at Acumen, there is all these really exciting things coming down the pike. And I think for the first time over the next few years, you're going to see proper impact measurement being a really serious differentiator of impact funds and social enterprises taking this seriously. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Julie Smith. I'm the COO of Soto, Inc. I was told to give you my contact information. My email is jsmith@desoto.com if you'd like to get in touch. Soto is a company that is using blockchain and other technologies to bolster property rights in the developing world. And as the title of the presentation suggests, we think this is a big component to poverty alleviation worldwide. I want to take a minute to explain why applying blockchain to real estate makes sense specifically. The first reason is representation. So Bitcoin solved what was called in computer science the double spend problem. One of the beautiful things about digital technology is that you can copy and transmit information very easily. And that's great when the asset you're representing is a photograph that you want to send out to 100 of your friends. But it's not good when what you're trying to represent is a unit of money, a dollar. You want it to be very hard to counterfeit that dollar. And that's why it's been so hard over the years for digital cash to really take off. Bitcoin's blockchain solved this problem. It allows for a unique digital representation of a dollar or a unit of money. And what works for money also works for other kinds of assets. So anything that needs to be uniquely digitally represented, like a parcel of land or a house or even a person, blockchain can help. The second is coordination. So as Ani sort of gave us an intro to this, I won't dive too deep, but blockchain provides a single shared ledger that every entity in the real estate value chain can see. It contains the state of that asset, of that real estate asset, and all of the participants in the real estate value chain don't necessarily have to trust one another that that's true. They trust the system. They have this single shared view. So banks and mortgage companies, escrow companies, title insurers, registries, all of these entities can have a single shared view of the state of an asset, and that greatly reduces coordination costs between all those entities in a real estate transaction. And then finally, the transactions themselves. So because of these first two properties, real estate transactions can be completed much more efficiently. The time for transactions to complete can be reduced from months or weeks down to days or even minutes. And this is particularly relevant in the developing world where registries are not really built with transactions in mind often. So it can take a very long time for transactions to occur, as we'll see. We recently partnered with Hernando de Soto. He has an institute in Lima, Peru called the Institute for Liberty and Democracy. And he and his team have been researchers of the informal economy for several decades. And one of his key observations is that 2.5 billion people in the world live in it as you and I, and many in this room probably know it. We live within the formal legal systems of our countries, and therefore we're connected to the global economy. 5 billion people in the world live to varying degrees extra legally. They don't have formal identities, they don't have formal title to their property, and therefore they can't participate in the global economy. And a big reason for this is that we have little structured knowledge of the ledgers that list and govern the property rights of these 5 billion people. So here are a few examples of some of these informal disconnected ledgers. Sorry. There we go. So here you see titles branded on cows in Tanzania, Egypt, Peru, Syria. So these people do own things and they do record them, but they're doing it informally. And not only that, they have the right to own. In practically every place on the planet, if it's through treaties, constitutions, laws, the people have the formal right to own property. The Universal Declaration on Human Rights specifically calls this out. So why then, if they have property and they have the legal right to own, are they not becoming titled? It's because in most of these places, turning rights into title is extremely costly. And here's an example from Tanzania. To register a piece of land takes 19 steps, 380 days, and about $1,500 in costs in a country, it's a small fortune in a country where per capita GDP is less than $900. So obviously, who would go through this process? What is life without formal ownership like? If you're this gentleman, you have a small business, you're an entrepreneur, you want to buy a truck so that you can scale this fruit business. Well, you can't register that business formally and connect to the legal system. You can't pledge your holdings against investment and credit. You can't divide or combine holdings to create surplus value. You can't acquire other companies. You cannot use those assets as credentials for access to public service. You can't rely on law enforcement to protect your property rights. And you're confined to your hyper-local economy, to your local market. You can't engage in any kind of large-scale entrepreneurship. There are a few other deadly global problems that result. Terrorism, it turns out, has a business model. Often they'll go into an area and say, we are armed, we'll protect your property rights in exchange for your support. And here are a few examples of that. Environmental damage, often the result of a lack of accountability due to poor property records. Unruly migration, if you lose your property rights in your home country, often you spill over into your neighboring countries to refugee camps or over into the West. If instead we surface the informal ledgers, terrorist power wanes, capital can be unleashed, and entrepreneurs can go to work. Hernando did this in Peru. He his policies defeated a terrorist organization called the Shining Path, and he did this by providing an accelerated path of formalization for farmers in Peru. And finally, here at DeSoto, we think that there is a convergence of technologies, not just blockchain, but social media, mobile applications, and machine learning and AI that can help surface this information, help us reach millions of more people at a time than we used to be able to reach. So that is DeSoto Inc. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. There we go. Hi, I'm Raphael. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Alice, and we're a transparent social impact network that's built on the Ethereum blockchain. And the goal of that network is to help identify and then scale truly effective social and environmental projects. And the way that we do that is through token economics, which is just a fancy way of saying that we create incentives for charities to be transparent about their impact, to make sure that that impact data is reliable. And then we create incentives for users of the network to systematically crunch all of that impact data and surface the very best projects on the network. Alice is a network that brings together like quite a few actors. So you have donors, you have impact investors, you have validators and evaluators that all interact. It's a decentralized network, which means that it's managed by the participants. So there are some fairly sophisticated governance protocols that come into play. And integrated into the network, there are also some data management processes, and I'm going to unpack some of those now. If you know about Alice already, and you might, it's because last year we rolled out the first bit of the protocol, which is a conditional donation platform. So that was the first pilot was run by St. Mungo's, a homelessness charity that helped rough sleepers in London do things like find accommodation, deal with mental and physical health issues, with substance abuse issues. And the reason we decided to start with donations is because we wanted to tackle one big problem first, which is that there's been a decline in public trust in the charity sector, and we wanted to help reverse that. And the way that it works is essentially just a payment for success model. So when you make a donation to a project on Alice, your money doesn't go straight to the charity. It gets held in escrow, so it gets frozen in one of our smart contracts, and it only gets paid out when the charities deliver on the goals that are set at the beginning of the project. So in St. Mungo's case, it was helping people find a home, for example. But crucially, the money only gets paid out to the charity from the escrow donations when they're validated by an independent validator, which is in this case was the Greater London Authority. So the local government of London, the housing team, verified all the proof, like rental agreements, and that validation triggered payments from the escrow donations to the charity. And the really cool thing is that when you give on Alice and your money as a donor is used to pay for an outcome, you get a little notification that tells you exactly what impact your money has made. We built it in a way that was super user-friendly. So we don't use cryptocurrencies. You don't donate in Bitcoin or Ether or whatever. You donate in what we call fiat, so pound sterling. And you just plug in your credit card details as a donor, put that in. The reason we did that is we wanted to reach a mainstream audience. We have a fairly sophisticated back end that allows us to do that. And it allows anybody, including our CTO's mum, that you can see here, to make a donation using the blockchain, which is pretty great. But as I said, Alice is way more than donations. Actually, donations are just the incentive layer to make sure that charities are transparent about their impact. We're now working on the next set of building blocks of the network, no pun intended. And the first one of those is an impact investment module that plugs into the donations. So as I said before, when you make a donation on Alice, it gets held in escrow. The charity has set its goals. But the big problem with a standalone payment for success model is that obviously the charity doesn't have the money up front to start running a project before it gets paid when it achieves its goals. So that's where the impact investors come in. They provide the seed capital that allows the charity to start a project. They also underwrite the risk of a project failing. So if no goals are achieved, they lose their money. But if goals are achieved, well then part of that goes to pay for the charity, and part of it also then goes to pay back the impact investors with interest. Pausing for a second, if that sounds like a social impact bond, it's pretty much because it is, in a way. We haven't reinvented the wheel. Social impact bonds are a big inspiration to the Alice platform, but the way that it's implemented actually gives participants some really great advantages over the way that they're structured right now. So the first one is really obvious. It means that charities aren't reliant on a single outcome payer. They can literally just self-commission their project and go out to the crowd for the outcome payments. But there are some really key advantages for impact investors as well. One of those is real-time data management. It means that as an impact investor, you can see when outcomes were validated, which outcomes were validated, all of that in real time as the validations occur. Another big advantage is that the legal costs are streamlined because everything's encoded in smart contracts and automated. It means that can be ported from project to project, which makes it a lot cheaper. It also means that any number of impact investors can come into a project during its life cycle without having to go through the complex renegotiations of contracts. It also means that the payments are automated, and actually there's a built-in liquidity to the investment. Because everything is tokenized, it means that investors who are there early can then sell on their tokens to a secondary investor who has perfect visibility over how the project has performed to date, and the payments are automatically rerouted to that secondary investor. And then the final one is that what we're trying to achieve is a reduction of transaction costs because they're shared across participants in the network. The way that we achieve that is through another set of crypto economics, another set of incentives. So charities are rewarded for providing more granular data around their projects, like internal KPIs, churn rates, etc. There's an integrated knowledge sharing market in the network, which means that if you do due diligence on a project, then you can post that on the network and others can access it for a fee, which reduces the due diligence costs for everybody. There are incentives for participants to systematically take all of that impact data, crunch it, and compare and benchmark projects. And then there is a mechanism whereby fees that are paid on the platform go into a grant-making fund. So it's a decentralized fund that's managed by the users of the network, and its goal is to allocate grants to smaller charities in particular so that they can design and implement really great projects, really high-quality projects. And so you can think of it as kind of like a decentralized fund to make grants for feasibility studies, things like that. The Holy Grail is what we're trying to achieve is to try to break out of the status quo, which is that we're stuck in prehistoric times when it comes to impact data, and people keep reinventing the wheel. If you see what we've done there, the data is really difficult to access. It's siloed in everybody's databases. Everybody's measuring with different frameworks, so we want to end that and come to a situation where you have high-quality, comparable data that's publicly accessible, that's reliable, with automated reporting and payments so that it makes it really easy to identify and then scale effective projects while lowering transaction costs. We're not building this alone. We have some great partners like Imperial College London's Cryptocurrency Research Lab, like the Impact Management Project, Charities Aid Foundation, really open to collaboration. So if you're interested, please come and grab me later. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I hope everybody is sober and feeling good. It's good to be back in business school. It's been 5 years since I've been in business school, and I actually sat in the second, not at this school actually, in school in Philadelphia. I sat in the second row. I remember in business school, and I remember I was not paying attention. I was on my phone, and there was a news flash from the World Bank showing the population estimates for 2050. And I looked at Nigeria, and Nigeria had 180 million, and then was projected to hit 460 million by 2050, and then 760 million plus by 2100. And that's when I realized, talking about a proximity, that I had to change where I was. So as an introduction, my name is Chi Natty, or Chinyere, but you can all call me Chi because Chi's a lot easier. And I'm originally from the Niger Delta in Nigeria. When I say originally, I mean going back over 250 years. It's been documented by one of my uncles. And yeah, it's a long time. And from the same village as well. And I don't know if you guys know about the Biafran War. Anybody know about the Biafran War? Yeah, so that was my tribe trying to leave Nigeria right after Nigeria was formed because all the oil was on our land. And my grandfather was mayor of Port Harcourt, which is the oil capital of Nigeria. And the war actually ended in my village when he sent his 31 kids out into the forest. My mother was one of them, and went out and met with the soldiers because they had chased our family to Nkwere, my village. And so after that, Shell came in, and oil and gas, and we all have power in the modern world, and it's wonderful. But what ended up happening in our neighborhood was over 10,000 oil spills, the equivalence of an Exxon Valdez spill every single year. And my parents grew up in that. In fact, my father fought in that war. So my parents grew up in that, and they actually became environmental engineers because of it. And I grew up around a lot of very smart engineers, always looking to invent and try to solve things and come up with new solutions. And when the BP oil spill happened in America, I remember sitting at a kitchen table with my mother, and she was the professor at the University of Central Florida in environmental engineering. And she had told me about how she'd found this biotechnology that was organic, liquid, and could be used by any local person because it's just liquid in a hose. And it would find oil, encapsulate it, destroy it, and then excrete oxygen. And in 30 days, an area that's been dead for decades starts growing green shoots. And I was young then. I was 28, and on the realizing that this was probably my last chance to go after something crazy. And I decided I was going to take that solution back home and clean up massive oil spills in our area and get agriculture starting. And this was 2010, and I went back to Nigeria, and I met with local people, I met with politicians, and everybody laughed at me. Everybody laughed me out of Nigeria. They called me a conservationist, and I should go back to LA, California, which is where I was living at that time. So I ended up going to business school because I wanted to think about a different way and how to solve this problem. And then I had that moment when I looked at the World Bank statistic and realized I was in the wrong place. So I went back home to the Niger Delta. And in those years in the village, working in the villages in the Niger Delta, I began to realize that there was a suite of technologies that was impacting our lives. There's only one village in the Niger Delta that has won a case against Shell. They won $84 million from Shell because of mobile technology. And then I also started to realize that if there was a way to connect the local villager on his phone to the executive at Shell, we could actually solve this problem. Now, there was a UN about the Niger Delta, the first time a study had ever been done about our oil pollution. And there was all these milestones that were set, all these standards. And I looked at that report and said, this is impossible. This is an area where no one trusts each other. All of the different stakeholders do not interact with each other. And luckily, in that time and working in the Delta and seeking out a way to solve this problem by building a platform, I ended up meeting Joe Lubin a couple years ago and started thinking about smart contracts. So we're actually very lucky that smart contracts were invented. And now today, actually next week, we're going to do a cleanup of 3 oil-polluted lakes, or fish ponds. We're going to hire ex-militants, and they're going to clean these ponds with the biotechnology. Then they're actually going to be connected to our COO, who's actually going to be in Singapore, who's going to have a smart contract with them, real-time monitoring to make sure they're actually doing the job. And once they've submitted in data, they then will receive Stellar. I don't know if you guys know Stellar, which is a cryptocurrency. And Stellar only because it's the fastest way of doing it as opposed to Ethereum. And then right then there, they're going to go and be able to trade in that Stellar, P2P, for Naira with a local woman in their village. And all of this is a journey of thinking, how can we bring transparency to a place where there's absolutely no trust? And one of the things that I feel like I have to let you guys in on a secret is that there are tens, hundreds of millions of people in Africa that are reputable, hardworking, and they just want to be part of the economic system. Yes, there are bad actors, corruption and such, but we're at an inflection point where that can change. Our next project is to work with the Niger Delta Development Commission, which is a classically corrupt government organization, but we're doing an audit of 4,700 public works projects that they have. It's being funded by the World Bank. And it's the first time there's been a full audit of their entire public works portfolio, and what that will allow us to do is identify who are the contractors who've actually completed the 8% of the projects that have actually been completed. Investors will be able to know the reputable contractors that they can transact with. And I know we talk a lot about the blockchain, but we just have to remember that it's just a tool. That's it. And it's a tool for a place where there's no trust. And I don't know if any of you guys ever done business in Nigeria. That's a place where you can't find anybody that you can trust. Trust me. You know what I mean? And so I believe the blockchain is a transactional layer that will be a leapfrog tool for Africa. And it's actually, more usually, technology is for the richest and most privileged. And that's what's exciting about the blockchain, is here we have a new technology that's actually for the least privileged. And I just want to encourage you all to check out our website, follow us on this journey over these next few months as we try to bring transparency and change the way people transact and bring capital to Nigeria. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Sean Conway, and I'm going to speak about ICSO, the blockchain for impact. So we're actually building some of the core infrastructure for the things that you've heard about today. And I'm going to make some claims today that I hope that you will verify, maybe in future. But we're here because we're excited about the potential that these converging information technologies have to give us superhuman powers to have much greater impact. And I'm particularly excited about the technologies that enable us to form and allocate capital in new ways. Now, you possibly all have heard of the ability that you now have to create your own digital currency. It's called cryptocurrency. And how many of you actually have cryptocurrency? A few of you. I claim that these cryptocurrencies are going to become extremely valuable, or not. They might be completely worse. Okay. So it depends on how they're distributed. And we have new market distribution innovations that are quite amazing that are going to create new purpose networks and new marketplaces. And this is really what's going to make a difference. And so with ICSO, we have been working over the past 4 years to create mechanisms, a protocol for taking impact data and turning it into tokenized value. And I'm going to talk about that. Oops, the wrong direction. And so this isn't a new idea. So around 10 years ago, almost to the day, I gave a conference presentation. It was at a conference where we were looking at the next web. It was 2.0 then, and it was about this new phenomenon of social networks and social media. And so I thought this would be a really disruptive idea. What we could do is use these collaboration tools to enable all of us to become share stakeholders in being able to deliver and bet on project and ensure that capital gets delivered more effectively. Well, I was quite naive, okay, because the technology really wasn't able to do this 10 years ago. Really what the past 10 years have been about, so I thought, let's all be impactful and have these technologies available. What we've ended up with is the hashtag. So this has become really symbolic of the past decade. And we see now how the hashtag as a technological device has been effective at creating cultural and political revolutions. But at the same time, it's also a sign of the dependencies that we've come to have on the social media platforms. Hashtag speaking at Skoll. And more recently, we've seen how these selfish genes have become vectors of memes of mistrust and bad information. And so I think that what we need now is, and what is happening is, an evolution of these memes into something which I'll call today a hash claim. Now, a hash claim is what we heard about earlier, claims that are cryptographically hashed. And why these are so important is because you can take these hash claims and tokenize them. And I'm going to talk a bit more about tokenization. So I truly believe that right now we're on the threshold between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0. Now, this is not just about technology. This is about a whole economic shift. It's about a whole change in the ways in which society works. So what does this mean for impact investing and how we achieve impacts? Well, we all want to believe that impact data is what we use to drive the allocation of capital into results. And we all know that good information helps us to achieve better impacts. But the reality is, and I think we all kind of know this, is that we're actually really bad at counting what matters, and we're not very good at valuing what counts. And so that's why when the SDGs were launched back in 2015, the Secretary General's office made the statement that we need a data revolution for sustainable development. So what's wrong with the way that we currently collect data? Well, I'm not going to go into the technical aspects of this, but just look to the person next to you and ask yourself, would I accept their data from whichever databases they have and just trust that data? And even if I would I be able to use it? There's a whole lot of governance issues around this. There's a whole lot of compatibility issues and so on. And so this idea of, there we go. so this idea of having a data commons for development, it's been a great idea, but it's just really not been possible. So with blockchain databases, we have an entirely new paradigm. And this is about having high definition data. So high definition because the data resolves to unique identifiers that sit on a blockchain, and it's high fidelity because of the hashing and digital signing processes. And so by bringing these together and creating this new claim format, we have something which is called a verifiable claim. Now, just in the low definition version, if you have an immunization delivered to a young woman at a time and a place by a healthcare provider who records this and signs it on a card, an immunization card that is provided by a project, that then makes this tweet and says, hey, we just reached 1,000 immunizations, hashtag stop Hep B. So that's the current way that we do it, really. This is what a hash claim looks like. It's not the user interface and it's not the real code, but basically we can encode this into a digital format which scales either at an event or a project consisting of many events. So we can make claims about anything. And because this is in a machine-readable format, we can then subject this to automated algorithmic evaluations. And as we get more data, the evaluations become smarter. So these oracles, and we've heard about bringing in data from other sources, these oracles become smarter. And so we end up with a hash claim that's worth the piece of paper that it's written on or not written on. What's really important about this is not only the aspects of the blockchain providing provenance and transparency and so on, but really that this is a new asset class for the impact economy. So tokens are a really important concept. They're going to change the ways in which people participate in delivering, in evaluating, and in funding impacts. And if we think about it, so digital tokens are really about providing rights of access, rights of use, rights of ownership. The Sustainable Development Goals are based on a framework of rights. Rights to clean water, rights to health, rights to gender equality, etc. And bringing these two capabilities, these two ideas together, I believe is going to be profoundly important for who gets to participate and how we get to distribute rights to more people, to create a fairer and more abundant participation in sustainable development. How we implement this is important. And so the tools that we use and how we configure impact projects that are being built on technologies such as the IXO blockchain, enabling different agents to participate, whether you're funding, whether you're evaluating, or whether you're delivering impact. And around this, we can now start to create some innovative marketplace mechanisms, such as smart impact bonds and so on. Very quickly, I'm going to talk about some of the projects. This has really been hard work, and we've had a lot of failures and lessons learned. So in South Africa, over the past 4 years, implementing a project called Ampli, which is digitizing preschool attendance records. We're going to be implementing a development impact bond in India for 200,000 young learners, tracking that over 4 years. Cook stoves with connected sensors that produce claims that can be translated into carbon credits. And we're very excited about the last one here, which is a project in Madagascar to measure the ecological restoration from reforestation projects using special sensing technologies. And I have to stop there. So let's all count what matters and value what counts.
Let me start by asking you a question. Can you raise your hands if you've ever donated to an international charitable cause, like the earthquake in Nepal, or the Syrian crisis, or the Ebola crisis? Okay, keep your hands up. Keep your hands up if you can tell me exactly where that money went, where it was spent, how it was spent, and the impact that it had. Literally not one hand. I've worked in the aid sector for the last 10 years, most recently managing about a $30 million portfolio across Africa. What became clear to me was that the global financial system wasn't built for the aid sector, wasn't built for the charity sector generally. So about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, we decided to build one that is. There we go. The current financial infrastructure is slow. So if you're responding to a crisis response or a disaster response, let's say there's been an earthquake or flooding somewhere, whether the funds take 2 days to arrive or 2 weeks to arrive can be the matter between life or death. The current banking system is also expensive. Banks charge upfront banking fees, offer poor exchange rates, for example. And it's also opaque. So we're unable to trace the flow of funds from end to end, from donor to beneficiary. And that lack of transparency all too often leads to the misuse or misappropriation of funds. In 2013, Ban Ki-moon of the UN estimated that up to 30% of official development assistance, ODA, was lost to fraud and corruption. Now, whether you believe that statement or not, what we know is if we combine the legacy banking inefficiencies with a lack of transparency, it means that a significant portion of funds aren't getting to where they're meant to get to. They're not able to serve those individuals or those communities, and therefore the impact is reduced. So at Disperse, we're building an alternative financial infrastructure for the aid sector. Disperse, in essence, is a fund management platform that drives the transparency, the efficiency, and the effectiveness of aid finance. And we work with governments, with donors, with NGOs, enabling them to transfer funds from end to end, from donor to beneficiary, ensuring that resources get to where they're meant to get to and can have the greatest impact. So whilst we envisage kind of an aid chain, certainly potentially starts from a fundraising campaign, goes through a number of organisations, and potentially funds are delivered to beneficiaries or individuals at the end of that chain. What we're primarily interested, for now at least, is that inter-organisational distribution. Whilst it's certainly not the sexy thing, everyone agrees that cash transfers is probably a much more sexy place to be working in. Inter-organisational distribution for us is the key challenge. It's where the biggest losses occur, whether that's from an FX process, foreign exchange process, or from potential losses through fraud or misuse, etc. So that, sorry, just going back, that is our primary focus for now. So here's how it works. An institutional donor, let's say DFID or the Gates Foundation, would deposit fiat funds, normal money, pounds sterling, etc., into our bank account. Disperse has a segregated bank account. Against that deposit, we then issue or tokenize money, as we've heard a lot today, digital money. So let's say DFID is funding a girls' education project in Malawi, and they deposit £1 million with us. We then issue 1 million digital pounds. It's those digital pounds that can then get distributed down that chain. So potentially from DFID to save the children in the UK, to save the children in Malawi, to local schools, local training providers, through that chain. And that they can be traced as they flow in real time. And that can provide a real-time audit as well. So let's say an organisation, a school in Malawi has got £10,000 worth of digital funds that they want to redeem. they can then redeem those funds or exchange or withdraw those funds from the platform into their local bank account, into local currency. The same could be done for individuals into mobile money, or those funds could be tokenized onto an e-voucher, for example, and could be redeemed within a merchant store. So back in the middle of last year, we implemented our first pilot, and that was distributing funds for a girls' education project, this time in Swaziland. And we worked with a charity called Positive Women. Now, for some of you that may know, Swaziland has the highest HIV/AIDS epidemic rate in the world, and if you're and parents subsequently often die relatively young, leaving their children as orphans. Now, if you're a female orphan in Swaziland, the likelihood of you accessing an education is relatively slim, or significantly reduced at least. So we work with Positive Women who raise funds and then distribute them for a number of different kind of projects or causes within Swaziland. This one specifically was distributing school fees to ensure that those young girls got access to an education. So the funds were deposited with Disperse, and then we issued electronic funds or digital funds to the Positive Women's account, and those funds were then distributed down that chain, could be tracked in real time, so that Positive Women and the other stakeholders involved could see exactly where those funds were at any given time, that real-time audit. But we also enabled them to save 2.5% on their transfer costs, which meant that they saved a couple of £100. Now, it was only transferring £20,000, but a couple of £100 meant that they could fund an additional 3 girls to go to school for a year. Now, at scale, we think that's quite exciting. Each year, $650 billion is distributed in aid finance. That's a huge opportunity. We've then formed a partnership with the START Network. The START Network, in essence, are a membership network of 42 leading humanitarian or aid agencies, like Oxfam and Save the Children. And they respond to smaller crises across the globe. And so what we're doing is that we started piloting with a series of these of the member organisations, and that we're starting to test the Disperse platform to demonstrate that it can have an impact at both an efficiency level, in terms of the speed, in terms of the cost savings, but also at a transparency level. And it's that transparency or that traceability that has been proven to be the most kind of important feature of what we're building. The ability to trace funds, as I said, from donor to beneficiary and potentially beyond. I'm really proud of what we've built to date, but in more ways I'm excited about where we're going. You know, we're still at the very early stages of this, but the potential of what we're creating, we believe, is huge. And I'd invite all of you to join us and be a part of that journey with us. So thank you very much.
Todd Morley, and I congratulate all the other speakers because we're all rebels and we're challenging the status quo. And part of the status quo is how we allocate and manage money, which I think is very backward looking. And as we're all talking about exponential returns, the godfather of that to me is Ray Kurzweil, who created the law of accelerating returns. So this goes back to, 1900? And you'll see a very predictable, smooth, upward sloping line that captures the exponential growth in computing power. But basically, you can take any data set and put it on that line, and you'll see pretty predictable results, including solar and other information technologies, which I'm going to discuss, that are going to produce substantially outsized returns and substantially in excess of the S&P 500, which to me is a backward-looking index. Why is that important? Because we have trillions and trillions of dollars sitting in non-traditional accounts, including insurance companies, that to me are mismanaged. We're running deficits even with the best performers. Very few people ever even beat the S&P. And so rotating that capital into this part of the world is going to be unavoidable, and so we want to be leaders in pushing that. So just that as an introduction. When we think about where we are, I think everyone's touched on it. We're seeing this decentralized economy. What we need to recognize is where we are in that in the evolution of technology. We need to not be frustrated by the pace of change and to effectively raise our level of consciousness and understand how quickly things are changing. We need to grab the empowerment, which is a power transfer, right? And so the decentralized economy, best captured in the new protocols like Ethereum, it's really a gift that is handed to the individual instead of what I call the guardians at the gate. It's amazing how hypnotized we are now by social media. If you want to know if your children are loyal to you or the Wi-Fi network they're on, try to turn it off and see what happens. And we've sort of lost the vibration with each other and with Earth. Watch Blue Planet 2 and see how you feel about our stewardship of the world. So we really need to educate ourselves. We need to understand the power of the decentralized economy. We connect peer-to-peer. We hardwire ourselves through smart contracts. We regain control of personal data and bring back trust through the open ledger. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, and I have never seen the kind of action that is happening right now. There is this palpable sense of accomplishment, but even more interestingly, of collaboration. People really are helping each other. It's not that's my pie and your pie. People are really coming together and moving very quickly. I think that capitalism as we've known it will decline, not in favor of communism, but in favor of free enterprise. It's interesting when you look at any market, you have the guardians at the gate. We used to have hundreds of investment banks. Now we have 4. You have 4 important VCs, 4 important publishers, 4 or 5 important PE firms. So they become oligarchies. And I believe that they're going to have a very tough time keeping up with this very quickly decentralizing economy. People have all the creativity they need. They are doing things with intention. You can now hardwire your intention. And I love the saying that intention will now be unhackable. Kind of an interesting concept. A philosopher friend of mine says we need attention, intention, awareness, curiosity, and will, but we control all those things, right? And so marshaling those together are going to produce amazing results. So what's so different about the new protocol-driven economy? Trust and accountability, and of course, peer-to-peer action. What's the value of trust? So we've most recently seen a problem of trust with our favorite Facebook. From peak to trough, it was down over $100 billion. Mark Zuckerberg did pretty well, I guess, in Congress yesterday, and the stock is up. But it's still down something like $60 billion. So if you want to put a value on trust, the last $60 billion problem was Lehman Brothers. Conveniently, that was its market cap, and it's gone. And so that was an issue of trust, right? We didn't trust their marks, and so they flushed them, and the same thing happened to Bear Stearns. So people are now starting to put a huge value on trust. I'm getting cue cards that are scaring me. Back in time, we had a problem with uneven access to information, so we created search, and then Google democratized information. Now we have huge problems caused by old technologies like coal, but I believe that they will go away with the decentralized economy. They just will not be able to keep up with the pace of change. I've recently come together with a group of people, including ex-Google executives and people from the AI world, into a new company/ecosystem called Y2X, as in Y to the X power. And our goal is nothing short of democratizing innovation and entrepreneurship. We should not control people's ideas. We should help them get to market and move them quickly. This is intimidating, speaking so quickly. We ironically live in the holy trinity for the execution of this. We have low interest rates. Governments are insolvent, if you tell the truth. And we have an extremely liquid private sector. And so all of that capital, $3 trillion sitting in negative interest rates in Zug, Switzerland for the tech companies is insane. You have $3.5 trillion sitting in hedge funds that earned 4.5% over the last 20 years, and yet you have these information technologies attacking the big problems that we've all been highlighting here. My view is that the things we're impacting are basic assets of need. Combine those with the SDGs, and if you'd like, the decentralized economy / blockchain will become the operating system for that, which is pretty phenomenal to get your head around that. Suddenly it's power to the people. not surprisingly, of John Lennon on the back of those cards. People still think that impact, I'm getting the 1 minute sign, impact is a tax on return. I think that we can show that by combining information technologies to solve old problems, this project in Nigeria will find itself on that graph of law of accelerating returns. You're going to find hyper growth there. So why would we allocate to backward-looking things when you can actually do good things and substantially outperform? Moore's law would be the most convenient way of thinking about the law of accelerating returns, right? So that would be y equals 2 to the 55th power. Imagine if you had 55 doublings, you'd have your own country. So just skipping ahead, fearful of Ani, I think that the key really is that we need data over dogma, and that the two greatest inefficiencies in the world are left brain and inner truth, and ideology and statistics. We simply have to get through the noise, get to the statistics, because you'll never solve a problem. And in the final moment, if you feel guilty about making money with these solutions, you can always start your own foundation and do the great work of the Skoll Foundation. Did I beat it?
To invite everyone up. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I know much has been made of my time making, but I would just like to say we got through 10 speakers in half the time of the plenary last night, so well done, everyone. Come on up. You can actually keep that if you'd like. There's the clicker. Great. Okay, so we've got a little bit of time for questions. I think we've got about 10 minutes. So, yeah, Gail.
Thank you. So I, as Peter pointed out, I'm the program director of impact investing and social finance. And what I'm seeing in the universe is this kind of lost in translation, both in traditional finance and social change, and potentially technology and social change. And what you're describing today is magnificent. And what I always ask my students or executives, so, and I'm fresh off watching Zuckerberg yesterday in Congress. We were too ideological, we were too idealistic. So I'm going to pose that question to you. It's 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and you're in Congress, and you're too idealistic. That's your message. What have you learned in terms of this emerging field? What are you experiencing right now that you're afraid of? And that we want to poke holes as we're pioneers and be very frank about what we're learning. So I'm just curious, as you're evolving these really exciting, I'm energized, I've got goosebumps, I'm ready to go. and all my students next week are going to say, I want to do blockchain. So but I want to also step back and say, let's speak the truth as pioneers in the field, and to say what's getting in our way and what do we do about it. So honesty, transparency.
I'm going to ask Chi to take this one.
In 30 seconds.
I'm going to ask Chi to take this one, and then I'm going to have Chi and actually Sean take this one, if you don't mind. Go ahead, if you pass the mic over to Chi.
Interestingly, it's an interesting time where blockchain is very exciting to everyone, and it's actually, especially the problem where we're dealing with in Nigeria, the people who normally would be actors against us, the government, have now become partners because of the excitement about blockchain. But you're asking, to answer your question, it's actually the fear of the government organizations in the U.S. and the West that's holding back innovation. Because in Africa, the CBN, I met with the CBN, they're looking to the SEC to lead, but that sort of a conservative view is actually is influencing them, and because they don't really, a lot of people don't really understand the opportunity of blockchain. They just want to. So it's almost like for someone like me who's like trying to create some societal change, it's like now we can sneak in the back door, but this sentiment that's coming from the SEC is actually holding back innovation in places where it's needed.
So I spoke about the transition from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. That's the technological transition. The other transitions are much harder. And what we're starting to see is almost one of these kind of archetypal battles that we've kind of read about in history and so on. The battle between good and evil, or old and new, and so on. And what's really going to bite us is the backlash from the incumbent system. And we're starting to see it already with regulators, with the big institutions and so on. And I don't know whether in 5 years we can really tip the balance in the right direction. And so I think there's some huge battles that are going to be taking place. And there's going to be battle scars, and there's going to be people in jail. Regulators are going to say you did wrong because you didn't get a banking license to transfer those tokens and that kind of thing. Okay. Well, I was just hoping that you do. There we go.
Good. And Scott, did you want to comment on this?
And just really quickly, we work in the blockchain space, and it's very fashionable nowadays to bash on blockchain companies, actually, because it's completely overhyped. There are a lot of scams and like crazy ICOs that are going on, and that's actually fueling the incumbents to sort of like dismiss what some of us are doing in this space. We're making quite a few organizations feel a bit queasy. We're starting to see charities in particular, some charities feel a little bit threatened because this is quite disruptive to the way that they work. So the question is whether over the course of the next 5 years, the hype is going to die down, real solutions are going to emerge, and what we expect is that a lot of new actors who can pounce on what Todd was saying, pounce on this new way of doing things, this decentralized way of doing things, is probably going to upend a lot of the incumbents.
Thank you. Two very quick things. I think the comparison to Facebook and Cambridge Analytica is a really good one. In 5 years' time, I could easily see any one of us up in front of Congress saying, defending why we created a surveillance state. Privacy is going to be a huge issue with all of this technology going forwards. We've got to get that right. But for me, the bigger challenge is communication. If we're not careful, we end up as this weird tech cult that just went ahead and did something and didn't bring everybody else with us. And that's the responsibilities on us for that.
Excellent. One more question. Go ahead, just say that.
Okay. Number thinker for Environmental Defense Fund. One of the things that I love the fact that it kind of consolidates and the opportunities for consolidating data and make it more accessible, but I'm thinking about prioritization of data. When I think of our whole team of, and I lead our sustainable finance strategy at EDF, and part of my job is getting our whole team of scientists and experts who know sort of like the key leverage points and the data that's relevant to the financial sector, getting them to act on that. And so just kind of I'm wondering, how do you think about, there's some places like land tenure where, that's obviously the priority, but these issue areas that are much more dispersed, I guess, in terms of what the lever is for the data, like mitigating deforestation or addressing overfishing. How do you sort of make sure that the data that's going to be the real lever for driving the change gets sort of surfaced up? That's my question.
Just really quickly, sorry I'm talking again. But that's where crypto economics come in, actually. So we have a whole business model that I couldn't get into before, which is about surfacing also getting experts to identify which are the best projects, which are the issues or the outcomes that are the best structured, and that's part of the partnership that we have with the Impact Management Project, which I'm sure you know, which is incubated by Bridges Fund Management, to try to bring all of that expertise in, and that's really a big focus of what we're doing.
One of the other really interesting things that none of this has yet touched on, which for people allocating capital, is to think about all these impacts and how you start to value those. And actually, none of this data will say what things have happened, and we might have better data on what people's experiences have been. And then there's going to be a really, really interesting thing that comes along about how people actually account for that social value. And that's going to be absolutely fascinating. And you can see a whole lot of new valuation techniques that start to say, these are the things that we value more and more, and that will be the data that starts to come out because we're putting proper social value on these things.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick point too. There's kind of a first step in just capturing data in the first place. A lot of the technologies, especially AI machine learning, are technologies that help us understand what the best or what the relevant factors are. And that's like the beauty of it is that by capturing things, obviously we collaborate with experts like you to figure out what are the right questions to ask, what should we be going after first. But as more and more things, more and more information comes online, applying machine learning to it, it can point out trends and patterns to relevant factors that matter that we couldn't have thought of in 100 years. So, that's another exciting frontier.
Yeah, so we all have an interest in the SDGs and such, and one of the things I find interesting is how capital at the top of the string is so interested in it, but it's not reflected at the bottom of the string being the world. And if you blockchain, hopefully we can tie the bottom and the top together and get transactions flowing. So when we're looking at, let's say for example the oil spill cleanup that we're doing, and the other projects that we're doing with the Niger Delta Development Commission, what we're building a reputation system that actually is weighted towards different SDGs. So in the end, you're going to be able to see which actor, and hopefully eventually which area, which country is actually contributing to each SDG. And that kind of data is actually highly valuable because capital at the top wants to be distributed to all these different SDGs, but it's not in the mindset of the government in the emerging world or the people. And by attaching those milestones and then also being because people are very competitive in Nigeria because the population is so young. By attaching those milestones and to the reputation, it actually gets people more focused on creating SDG projects, which helps transfer that mindset and eventually will unearth the type of data that capital is looking for to work with.
Could I put provocation in?
Yes, but we are out of time, Nigel, so it has to be very short.
Real quick provocation.
Yes.
I mean, we're building a thing in blockchain, with some amazing tools. I think doing some amazing things. My provocation is this is the language we're starting to use. Whoever said it was a tool is absolutely right. Doesn't create any product, does not create an ounce of social impact. Right? So people on the ground are creating that impact. And I think some of the language that's starting, even with the decentralised of using about experts, it reminds me very much from the provocation, the danger is this sounds like 10 years ago at Skoll when people talking about social investment.
Interesting.
Okay. And that is the danger. And it's brilliant what you're all doing, and I love it. But I'm just saying that the provocation is, let's not go down the road where suddenly we've got more top-down product telling people down there what they should have and how we're going to do it and how we're going to solve your problem.
Excellent, Nigel. That was great. Thank you. Okay, we've run out of time. I wasn't here 10 years ago. I was here 9 years ago when we were talking about social investment. So just going to quickly wrap up. Thank you very much for all of your time and for our amazing set of speakers. I mean, just another round of applause, please, for them. So looking forward to seeing many of you back here next year to look at where we've come. Please feel free to get in touch. This part of exposing all of you amazing individuals to these ideas is for us to build things. This is not a thing yet. This is something we are all building. This is a world that we're all creating. So I think that there's a lot of different talents and resources in the room. So I encourage you to interact with panelists are going to be here all day. Feel free to find myself, Nikki, Tom's also going to be around all week. And thank you very much and have a good rest of your day.